Hello friends, this is Pammy Jaiswal. Hope you all are safe at home and we are all going through this COVID-19 crisis. The whole economy is facing this crisis. Therefore, the regulators are taking all the steps to make things move smoothly. And one such step has been from the MCA, from SEBI, to uh, bring in the virtual facility for convening board meetings and general meetings. Today's topic would be AGM through VC or virtual AGMs. We all know that this is a very relevant topic because most of the companies are now planning to hold their annual general meetings. So, without uh, wasting any further time, let us start with the presentation. Before we start, it is very important to mention that this presentation is only for academic purpose and it is not intended to be a professional advice or opinion. Anyone who relies on this will do so at one's own discretion. So the agenda for today's presentation would be the points which are mentioned on your screen. First, we would learn about the purpose and the provisions on AGM. Then we move to the concept and the need for virtual AGM. Then we, of course, would be dealing with the MCA circular dated 5th May in detail, which brings about the whole, modality and everything related to conducting the annual general meeting through VC. Next, we would move to see what are the components of the virtual AGM or the virtual AGM provider, you can say, the VC platform. Next, we see the procedural part, which would actually mean the procedure before, procedure at, and procedure after the virtual AGM. So let's start. So friends, when we talk about general meetings, what do we say? I mean, is it a compliance requirement or it's a business requirement? Now, general meetings, if we have to if you have to talk about general meetings or the purpose of general meetings, it is a place, or it is an occasion where the owners meet the managers, right? It's a social occasion where the shareholders meet the managers. Now, where one can also ask, is it an occasion to meet, eat, chat, or network? So we all very well know what the shareholders actually do at the AGM and in what they're actually interested in the AGM. But let's not talk about that. So coming to the main discussion, that what is the purpose of general meetings? So general meeting is not to serve a compliance purpose. It's not where we actually measure the accountability of the management, right? Because holding or conducting an annual general meeting is generally with the intention so that the owners or the shareholders meet the managers. It's not a policy directive, but it's a business requirement, of course. Coming to the various provisions under the Companies Act and the listing regulations dealing with AGM, there are quite a few of them, but let us just discuss few of the relevant provisions. Starting with, if we talk about section 96, section 96 provides that when a company is required to hold the annual general meeting, what is the time period? Like no company should have two AGMs. The gap between which should exceed 15 months. A company should hold its first AGM within 9 months from the date of the closing of the first financial year. In other cases, or generally if we talk, general meetings or the annual general meetings are required to be held within 6 months from the end of the financial year. If, let's say, a company is not able to hold the annual general meeting within the required time period, it is supposed to take or seek extension from the ROC prior to the time period on which it is actually required to hold the annual general meeting, and the ROC can, for reasons specified, for reasons given to the ROC, it may provide or grant extension which shall not exceed 3 months. When we talk about the other provisions, Section 96 also provides the time, the duration, or the time period within which the annual general meeting is to be held, which is the business hours starting from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. and it should not be a national holiday. It should be held where the registered office of the company is situated, in the same city or in the same town or village where the registered office of the company is situated. Now, there is also a provision of sending out notices for annual general meeting, which is given in section 101. It states that if a company is not able to call the annual general meeting by giving the actual length of the notice, which is 21 clear days, right? Which actually goes on to, 24, 25 days, taking the postal facilities and the other requirements. So if it is not able to call by giving the normal length of notice, it can call an annual general meeting by giving a shorter notice. Now there is a requirement of, or a condition on when the shorter notice can be called. The shorter notice annual general meeting can be called in case of an annual general meeting if you have taken the consent in writing or by electronic mode of your members who are representing not less than 95% who are entitled to vote at the meeting. So this is a very important requirement which we'll discuss further as we discuss the MCA circular. We will also discuss about the requirement or any sort of a probability of waiver of shorter notice in connection with the MCA circular dated 5th May 2020. Then, of course, there are other provisions like the provision of 102, which talks about the explanatory statement, which is to be given for the special business items which are conducted at the annual general meeting. Now, we all know that in an annual general meeting, you have two types of items. You have your ordinary business items, which consists of the consideration of financial statements and the reports of board of directors and auditors, then the declaration of dividend, appointment of directors in place of those who are retiring, and the appointment and or the fixation of remuneration of your statutory auditors. Apart from these four items, and the fourth item being an occasional item which comes after every 5 years. So apart from these items, all the other items are special business. Now, for any special business, a company is required to provide an explanatory statement which would actually provide all the information to the members in connection with the special business, right? The explanatory statement is mandatory for special business items. Now, when we mentioned about annual general meeting, I just said that there are two types of business items that can be conducted. Ordinary business items and special business items. In case of EGM, extraordinary general meeting, any business that you deal, any business that you take up is a special business. So here, one more thing that I would like to clarify, which many people, in fact, some students also, they have this confusion between special resolution and special business. So please understand that a special business, it's not required that every special business will be passed by taking a special resolution. Special resolution is passed for items which the respective provisions under the Act, they themselves, there it is specifically mentioned that for passing that resolution or for taking up that business item, you need to pass a special resolution, right? But for many items which are actually special business items, they can be passed by passing an ordinary resolution. When I say this, I would like to give you an example. Like for example, if you're taking up the appointment of an independent director, now this is a special business item, but there is no need for you to pass a special resolution unless it's a case where it's a case of reappointment. So moving forward, then we have other provisions as well. Section 111 is a very important provision because it talks about circulation of members' resolution. So this is actually an empowering provision or empowering section to the members who can actually take use of this, and they can require the companies to take up the business items which the members or the members having the requisite shareholding have demanded from the company. Okay, I think we can move to the provisions under the listing regulations. Now, the listing regulations, when we talk about the AGM related provisions, basically they say that, if they provide that the proceedings of the annual general meeting is required to be intimated to the stock exchange within 24 hours of the conclusion of the meeting. This is something which the companies need to act upon as soon as the AGM is concluded. Apart from this, there is also a requirement of giving an intimation of at least 2 working days in advance, excluding the date of the intimation and the date of the meeting, about the AGM or EGM, which is held for some kind of a fundraising, indicating the type of issuance. Then there is also the requirement of sending AGM related documents, as the same is there under the Companies Act provisions also. There are also provisions regarding now Regulation 44. Now Regulation 44, I think for the time being has been relaxed. It has been made as for the other companies that within 6 months you can hold. That for top listed entities, top 100 listed entities, they are required to hold their AGM within a period of 5 months from the closure of the financial year. There is also a requirement of doing a one-way live webcast of the proceedings of the annual general meeting. Now, as we move forward, we will actually discuss the relevance of the requirement of a webcast in case of a virtual AGM, whether we need to give a webcast or this requirement can actually be done away with. Then we are also required to provide the voting results to the exchange within 48 hours of the conclusion of the general meeting. Now, let's start with the concept of annual general meetings. When we started, we spoke about the purpose. Now, it's a yearly gathering where the shareholders of a company, they actually meet the board of directors, right? So why to conduct an annual general meeting? So that the shareholders can actually know what's the progress of the company during the financial year. So is it mandatory? Of course, it's mandatory. It was there under the Companies Act 1956 also, and it is also there under Section 96 of the Companies Act 2013, where a company is required to hold their AGM within 6 months from the end of the financial year. And between 2 AGMs, there should not be a gap of more than 15 months. OPCs, of course, are for obvious reasons. There's no requirement for an OPC to conduct an annual general meeting. Now, friends, you will actually see this particular slide reflects a very, very interesting data. It actually states the attendance and voting pattern in physical AGMs. Now, what we have done is we have actually gathered some data of some very large listed companies, and we have seen, or we have tried to observe the pattern of attendance and voting thereat in physical AGMs. What we found was very interesting, that the ratio of members who are actually voting through e-voting, right, versus the people who are voting at the meeting, there's a vast difference. That means you'll actually, when you see the ratio of members who are actually voting through e-voting, the percentage of members, it's quite high. It's very high. And when we look at the members who are voting at the venue, it's very negligible. In some cases, you'll not be able to see actually the comparison. So it's so negligible. And when we talk about the attendance part, similarly, in attendance also, the members who attend the AGM are very, very less, not even 5%, right? So rest of the members, they actually don't attend the AGM. Here, I mean, I'm sure many of the listeners who are listening to this video would wonder that then, I mean, we have so many food packets being distributed at the AGM. I mean, thousands and 500,000 packets are just, it vanishes. So, I mean, what happens, I mean, is the members who come, they simply come and they would actually just take the packets. One person would come with, for 40, 50 proxies, they just take the packets and then they go. So when we talk about the voting, there's no voting by them. They don't vote. They just come, sign, and they go away, right? But when we talk about the comparison of the voting pattern electronically and the voting pattern at the meeting or physical AGMs, there is a vast difference. And as we can see, most of the members, they actually, they don't attend the AGM. Or when we talk about the voting ratio, most of the members use digital platform to vote, or they actually put the e-voting, they cast e-voting to pass the resolutions moved at the annual general meeting. Why is there a need of a virtual AGM? Now, this question during this time, you all would say that what sort of a question is this? Because this is so obvious. Because we are all required to contain the movement or reduce the physical movement, and we are all required to stay at home, and that there is least physical movement, and there is this concept of social distancing is maintained, so as to contain the spread of the COVID-19 virus. Now, of course, that has actually been the driving force behind the introduction of virtual AGM in India, at least. But this virtual AGM, this is not new at all. We'll see in the next few slides only that this is actually a global presence where many countries have actually accepted, and they are doing virtual AGMs. So here, when we're talking about India and we're talking about now, this time, so of course it's an annual event, so this has to be conducted. But because of the social distancing guidelines, I mean, there is a restriction on the gathering of large public. So for companies, right, for companies who are following the calendar as their financial year, they have been extended an additional time to 30th of September to hold their AGMs. And there was a specific circular in this regard. However, no extension has been provided to companies following financial year. So when we are talking about physical AGM, when we're talking about virtual AGMs, what about the physical AGMs? Is it gone? I mean, is it something of the past? Is it a history? So, friends, no, it's not history. It's very much there, and it will be there for quite. It will be there, at least in India, for sure. It will not go. It will not be completely ruled out. So, companies which are required to provide e-voting facility, they can conduct their AGM in the city of where the registered office is there, with limited number of members, of course after receiving permission from relevant authorities. Now, when we look at the chart on the slide, the companies which are covered by e-voting, what they can do, they can hold physical AGM with remote e-voting. The second option is they can do physical meeting with remote e-voting along with the VC participation option. And the third option is that they do not conduct a physical AGM. They simply provide remote e-voting with VC facility, right? Now, in case of private companies and closely held companies, physical AGMs can be conducted again after, of course, complying with the uh, revised guidelines from the various authorities. So, friends, it's very, very important to understand that while MCA has brought in this circular which has introduced or has given the corporate world a facility to conduct the annual general meetings through VC, physical AGMs are not completely ruled out. This is just a temporary phenomena that physical AGMs are not being encouraged. So to discourage physical AGM and at the same time allow the companies to make their routine matters sail through for the financial year 1920, MCA has brought in the facility, right, which the companies can or cannot avail. It's on the companies, right? But let's say when we are saying that this is a facility which can be availed or may not be availed by the companies, but if the timeline, if the timeline for holding the AGM, it comes within such period where the lockdown still persists, companies have no option. They have to either seek an extension or they will have to conduct their AGMs through this, right? So the conclusion is that there is no bar on conducting physical AGMs, but you'll have to follow the guidelines which are issued by the appropriate government authorities to conduct such AGMs. Further, if situation normalizes before 31st December, companies may conduct physical AGMs as they may seek so or this may opt for. Now, we are talking about, I mean, just spoke about whether physical AGMs are still there or has been completely ruled out. Now we know that yes, they are not completely ruled out. They're very much there in the picture. So, but why do the companies or why should the companies conduct virtual AGMs? What motivates them? What would motivate a company to leave physical annual general meeting and conduct a virtual annual general meeting? So we will surely find an answer to that as we move forward. So as you can see, the weight machine, the benefits are very, very heavy. So you have lots of benefits to conduct the virtual AGM rather than the cost. The cost is not that heavy, it's light. So let's coming back to the point. Now, when a company decides whether it has to hold a virtual AGM or a physical AGM, the board of directors have to actually look into this question. They have to analyze the question on the basis of various parameters. Because, for companies which are very large companies with large number of shareholders, right, versus a company which is a very small company. So what kind of arrangements, what kind of facilities will be required to be given? Well, let's say for companies which have overseas shareholders, let's say for companies which are, simply wholly owned subsidiaries of foreign companies. So what are these factors that actually come into the consideration of the board of directors when they actually decide that they have to hold a virtual AGM or a physical AGM? So friends, you have the cost slide in front of you, which actually will show you a picture of when a physical AGM is conducted. A lot of costs go into the, in conducting such AGM. It goes to some lakhs of rupees. So what are the actual components of the cost? For providing the venue cost is involved, courier and postage cost is involved, printing, stationery cost, scrutinizers fee, RTA fee, webcast cost, refreshment expenses. As we all know, it's very, very, we need not mention it that the refreshment expenses are also very dear. Then we have the e-voting facility expenses. So all of this actually go into picture. So you'll have to actually bear the cost also. You have to look at the logistics part. You have to arrange everything that everything is very smoothly carried out. virtual AGM is a cost-effective mode. Why do we say that? Why do we say that the virtual AGMs are cost-effective mode? As most of the aforesaid expenses like venue, courier, postage cost, printing and stationery expenses, refreshment expenses, it will be saved. Now that we see in the next slide. Benefits. When we look at the virtual AGM, we will not have venue cost. We will not have the postage and courier cost. We will not have printing and stationery cost, right? We will not have refreshment expenses. Now, webcast cost, we will come to it a little later, or we can discuss it here also. Now, when we're talking about the cost on webcast, now webcast requirement was brought in by the listing regulation amendments in 2018 with the purpose that where top 100 listed companies or the top some 100 listed companies to my recollection, they are required to provide this facility of one-way live webcasting of the annual general meeting proceedings. Now this was given so that the members who are not able to make it to the venue, not able to attend the annual general meeting in person, they actually get to see, they actually get to hear what's happening in the AGM. They might have just they might have used the remote voting facility, they might have already voted, right? So for them, at least they should be privy to the discussions at the annual general meeting, and therefore this requirement was brought in. Now, as we move further, we will understand why the live webcast requirement actually becomes very redundant in case of VC AGMs. But yeah, coming back to the benefits now, virtual AGM, it's cost effective. You can actually move your urgent business matters, right, without the need to defer it. It is very, very flexible because the logistics part, the venue booking, the refreshment expenses, and a lot of other things that actually go into making a physical AGM a success, that's not required. Now also we have also seen cases where people travel all across from abroad, like because they are the representatives of the holding company, to come and conduct the annual general meeting of the wholly owned subsidiaries in India. So that cost, the time that they actually given for participating in an annual general meeting, which is just it's just a mere requirement of law, because members there, if two members are coming to participate in a meeting, right, from all the way from abroad, they can actually do that. In case of virtual meetings, there is no need for them to travel, right? They can stay where they are and they can still be part of the AGM. They can still be part of the proceedings that are going in the AGM. Now, as we mentioned, virtual AGM is not a new concept, right? In UK, in US, we see that this has already been there. For other countries, yes, during this COVID-19 crisis, many other countries have actually brought in this requirement or the facility of holding the AGM through VC. Now, as we mentioned earlier when we started, that MCA and other regulators, they have been bringing in bunch of relaxations, bunch of extensions, amendments, changes with the intention of causing minimum disruption, because everyone is already disrupted, the operations are already disrupted. So in order to smoothen things, in order to make things move in a better manner, MCA has brought in, specifically if I have to say, these 4 circulars. When I talk about the meetings part specifically, apart from this, there are various other circulars which have been brought by MCA in different specific areas. Now, MC circular dated 19th March 2020, it deals with the fact that even for restricted items, the board meetings can be through virtual means. Next was the MC circular dated 8th of April, which allowed the conduct of EGMs for unavoidable business through VC or other audio-visual means. We had another circular on 13th April which clarified certain practical issues with respect to the 8th April circular. And then we had the MC circular dated 21st April, which was brought in to give extension to the companies following the calendar year as their financial year to hold their annual general meeting till 30th of September 2020. Now we come to the MC circular, which allows AGM through VC dated 5th May 2020. Now this circular very clearly mentions that this circular has to be read along with the previous circulars of EGM, which was brought in by 8th of April 2020 and 13th April 2020. What are the business items that can be transacted through virtual AGM or in a virtual AGM? It is very important to clarify that in an AGM, you cannot say that ordinary business items cannot be transacted. If we say that, then for what are we holding the annual general meeting? Annual general meeting has always been to conduct the ordinary business items first, and then we have the special business items, of course. So the MC circular clearly provides and permits the conduct of both ordinary business items as well as special business items. Now, when we talk about the special business items, there is a catch. What's the catch? For special business items, only those business items which are considered unavoidable by the board will be taken up or should be taken up at the virtual AGM. Now, what is this unavoidable business, right? If we talk in a generic sense, unavoidable business would mean something which cannot be deferred. So as we move forward, we will understand that, of course, the intent of MCA was, to mention the specific part that only unavoidable special business items should be taken up, is that maybe the notices which will go for the virtual AGMs, they might not go to all the shareholders, or let's say even if we are sending, it might not reach them, even after the best efforts taken by the company by giving public advertisement for the purpose of registering their email IDs, right? So because to some extent, the shareholder democracy was also a question. Therefore, MCA has very clearly mentioned, and with this intention, the MCA has clearly mentioned that only unavoidable business matters should be taken up at the virtual AGM. Now, unavoidable items of special business. Now, what should be a guide? How do a board, on what basis does a board say that this item is avoidable and this item is unavoidable? Now, there could be items which I actually need to pass, which I actually need to approve, because it's important for the running of my company. It's important in terms of giving benefit to my employees, for giving benefit to my shareholders, for the benefit of the business, right? But there could be some items which are just customary or very, very routine, which are not having any immediate impact, even if we don't take them up. Now, if let's say we are not taking up and let's say an avoidable business item at the AGM, can we take it and pass through a postal ballot? Now, answer to that would again be a no, because when we look at the EGM circulars also, right? EGM circulars also, which is valid till 30th of June, to be precise. There also, this has been mentioned that the company should pass or take up the AGM or call the EGM for unavoidable business matters. The only reason is that there might be a situation that the notices calling such meetings through virtual mode might not reach all the shareholders for various reasons. The next question is, what are the pros and cons of putting the item in the AGM? I mean, what benefit does it have, or what burden will it have if the company does not take it to the AGM, as I mentioned, right? So unavoidable is something which is preferably not avoided. You cannot avoid it, right? But then you'll have to understand the impact of avoiding the business, or the benefit of avoiding it, or the burden of avoiding it. So basically the board has to discuss, or has to actually decide on the impossibility of avoiding a business item, or the advisability of avoiding a business item. Now let's take an example over here. Let's say the company wants to adopt a new set of articles of association. Now, this particular item of business, will it be taken, or will it be considered as avoidable or unavoidable? Now, if this particular set of articles which the company now intends to adopt is just a very contemporary or normal set of articles, let's say because the company was following the articles of 1956, and just for the purpose of bringing it to the companies at 2013 model it wants to adopt, without any change in the articles relating to the powers and rights of the shareholders inter se, the members inter se, or the company and the shareholders, then of course this is something which the company can actually defer and can hold in the next year, because there's nothing which the company is losing, there's nothing which the shareholders are losing either, right? So on the other hand, let's say a set of articles which actually contains revised powers, revised rights, amended rights pursuant to some SHA which the company has uh, entered into with their strategic investors. Now, in that case, this is, I mean, surely not avoidable, because it actually has an impact on the rights of both the shareholders as well as the company. Now, we will also have to understand the commercial expediency and interest of the larger interest of the stakeholders, which is involved in taking up or not taking up a particular business item. I mean, which is, if not taking up a particular item, is it going against the minority of the shareholders, or there? I mean, will it have an impact on the business performance of the company? Let's say the company wants to come up with an issuance of NCDs. Now, this is something which the company will have to understand. They will have to assess the requirement. They will have to understand. They will have to actually compare, or they have to actually see what would happen if they don't take this item up. I mean, if they cannot raise funds through the issuance of NCDs, what impact would it have on the business? So surely this, some kind of a business item with respect to raising of funds, and that is something, of course, the company takes into picture only when there's a need, and the need is of the business. So one cannot compromise on the need of the business, and such items of business are generally unavoidable. Also, certain items which require some physical interaction, right? Which, because it might affect, or it might be required to take the shareholders' view. So therefore, considering all of this, the board will have to take a reasoned view of considering any item of business as avoidable or unavoidable. Now, special business which has been transacted by companies. If we look at this pie chart, we will have an idea. In the financial year 1819, some very large listed companies, if we look at the proportion of the type of items, special business items, which have been taken up. So mostly it's on the appointment, reappointment of the independent directors. We have 4% dealing with RPTs. We have issuance of debt securities. We have appointment of directors beyond the age of 75, comprising of 2% only. Then we have remuneration of cost auditor, which is mandatory item, which has to be brought for ratification of the remuneration of the cost auditor. Appointment and reappointment of NEDs. So these are generally the items which form part of the special business items in an annual general meeting. Now we come to the scope of the MCA circular. Now, when we look at the circular, what we understand, what's the scope of the circular? Now, this particular circular is allowing all the companies to hold their annual general meetings during the calendar year 2020 through BC, or other audiovisual means. Now, whether this circular applies to companies following calendar year or financial year. So friends, it applies to all the AGMs that are conducted in the calendar year 2020 without making any distinction between the companies following a calendar year or a financial year. So companies which follow a financial year, if they are conducting their AGM within 30th of September, that can be conducted through VC. If they apply for extension, post 30th of September, it can still be conducted through VC up to 31st of December 2020. For the other set of companies which follow a calendar year as financial year, now in that case, if AGM is conducted 30th of June, it can be conducted through VC again. If AGM is conducted till the extended time period of 30th of September, in that case also, it can be conducted through VC. And let's say if there's an extension which has been applied and the meeting falls, it's up to 31st of December only, in that case also it can be conducted through a VC. Now, when we look at the MCA circular, what we understand is that this circular talks about it actually divides the applicability of the circular into three parts. Now, why do we say three parts? Because most of you, I'm sure that you all have also read the circular, and you all must be thinking why I'm talking about three types of companies or three types. I mean, applicability is divided into three parts. Generally, what we understood was that the applicability of the circular is divided into two parts, or rather two classes of companies. One, companies which are required to provide e-voting facility, and the other, companies which are not required to provide e-voting facility. Now, I have actually mentioned something which is mentioned clearly in the circular also, that companies which have opted for providing e-voting facility. Now, what is this class? What is which peculiar class of company is this? We'll find that as we move forward. Coming to the first set of companies, the first class of companies which are required to provide e-voting facility. Now, which companies are required to provide e-voting facility? The equity listed companies or the companies which have not less than 1,000 members. So in India, where we have almost 12 lakh companies which are registered, a very small portion is actually listed, right? So a very handful of companies are there which are actually required to provide e-voting facility. But yes, this is one class on which the circular is applicable. Coming to the third class first, which is the companies which are not required to provide e-voting facility. Now, companies which are not required to provide e-voting facilities, of course, companies which are not listed, right? And let's say we have less than 1,000 members. So here, again, there is a condition. For companies which are required to provide e-voting facility, there is no condition provided on following this circular. They can straight away follow the circular if they want. But for companies which are not required to provide e-voting facility, they can follow this circular only if they fulfill condition. What is the condition? The condition is that these companies should have the email address registered with them of a requisite number of their shareholders. Now, what is this requisite number? They should have the email addresses of at least 50% or more of the total members. And this particular specified number of shareholders whose email addresses are registered with the company should be representing 75% in value of the paid up share capital of the company. Only if this condition is fulfilled, then only the companies which are not required to provide e-voting facility can conduct their AGM. So we will learn about this particular condition and the different scenarios that can come in to check the requirements of requisite number in detail as we move forward. In the meantime, as I mentioned that this circular is applicable on 3 classes of companies. So you all must be wondering what's the second class, which I just skipped. So going back on the second class of companies, companies which have opted for providing e-voting facility. Now friends, this class of company is not something which I have introduced. This is mentioned clearly in the MCA circular, and this particular expression might have created confusion in the minds of lots of readers. So what does this expression actually mean? The expression "or any other company which has opted for such facility" should generally refer to a company which is not required to provide e-voting facility, however, has optionally provided the same to its shareholder. Now, the expression would actually mean, in general terms, would mean this. However, whether is it actually possible to have such class of companies under the Companies Act? Now, let's see the provisions. Now, the e-voting provisions under the Companies Act, Section 108, it states the central government may prescribe the class or classes of companies and manner in which a member may exercise his right to vote by electronic means. This section does not provide a right to the company to voluntarily opt for e-voting. Similarly, the allied rules, which is Rule 20, there is no scope for voluntary opting for e-voting facility. Now, when we compare this provision with the provisions of postal ballot, there we find that that particular section, which is section 110 dealing with postal ballot, it permits the conduct of business items required to be compulsorily conducted through postal ballot through e-voting as per section 108. Now that is something which is allowed under the postal ballot section, so companies may do that. However, for e-voting, there is no concept of companies opting for e-voting, right? So there does not seem to be explicitly a class of companies that have opted for e-voting. So even if a company did a VC EGM, it cannot be contended that the company has opted for e-voting and therefore this circular should be applicable. So moving further, as I mentioned, on the third class of companies, which deals with companies which are not required to provide e-voting facility, what would be the computation of requisite number? I mean, who all should be there in the requisite number? Whether preference shares should be counted for the requisite number? Now, we are talking about an annual general meeting where the members have the right to vote. Unless the preference shareholders have acquired the right of voting because of non-payment of dividends, they should not be counted. Next, when we talk about the shares which have been transferred to IPF, now here also the answer would be very, very clear, because IPF, the shares which actually go to IPF, the voting rights are frozen. Therefore, they cannot be counted. Whether shares held in the name of President of India is to be counted? Surely yes. Whether shares held in the name of foreign shareholders are to be counted? Again a yes. And in case of joint holders, the answer would again be a yes. So this is a chart which you all can see on the applicability of this MC circular. Now, if we look at the type of company specifically and then talk about the requirement or whether AGM through VC can be conducted. Now, equity listed companies, yes, as we mentioned very clearly, that AGM can VC through be conducted. What about debt listed companies? Now, if they have more than 1,000 shareholders, in that case, of course, they can conduct the AGM through VC. However, let's say if e-voting is not applicable, in that case, they will have to fulfill the requisite number of email addresses available with them in order to conduct the AGM through VC. Unlisted public companies, again, if the requisite number of email addresses available, then they can conduct the AGM through VC. Private companies, now if it's a closely held company, they can actually conduct physical meeting. Now in foreign countries, what we understand that the requirement for AGM in case of private companies has actually been done away with. But in India, we still have this practice, we still have this provision, we still have this requirement that for private companies also, there is a need for holding annual general meeting. because it's a very weird situation, because in private companies, let's say there are two members, they're both in the same family. Now they have to call an annual general meeting through VC because of this circular. That would be very, very unlikely and unwanted, right? For banking companies, now banking companies which are companies under the Companies Act, they can conduct AGM through VC if they fall in class 1 or class 3 companies. If they are not registered as a company, of course they cannot, they are outside the ambit of this particular circular altogether. Guarantee companies, if email address of minimum 50% of the total members of the company representing not less than 75% of the total voting power in the meeting is registered, they can conduct their AGM through VC. This particular circular talks about the participation of directors and auditors. Now, when I say this circular, I'm actually reading it along with the EGM circulars also, which required that the independent director and the auditor, they should be present in the general meeting. Now, what if they fail to attend? Of course, even if they fail to attend for some valid reasons, it shall not invalidate the proceedings of the meeting. However, in case of AGM, presence of auditor would be compulsory, because financial statements are placed before the approval of the members, and therefore, in case of annual general meeting, the presence of auditors must be ensured. Now, is it compulsory for chairperson of audit committee in our CSRC to compulsory attend virtual AGM? As we have, if you look at the listing regulations, of course, it's mandatory. However, they have to make their best endeavor to participate, and they must participate. However, if for valid reasons, if for very, very valid reasons they're not able to participate, it should not invalidate the proceedings of the AGM. Coming to the components of the virtual AGM or the virtual AGM platform. When we say virtual AGM, we are talking about a lot of things. Why a lot of things? Because before this advent of virtual AGMs, we used to have physical AGMs where notices, annual reports, the proxy forms, the attendance slips, everything was going physically, also through email also, and there was a specific SOP which was there. Now, when we have virtual AGMs, we will have to have the registration. Now, what is registration? Of course, the registration of the email IDs of the shareholders, right? There would be a lot of data which has to be managed. Now, when we say data, we are talking about the data which is, let's say, the data which goes with the notices, then the data which is shared with the shareholders during the meeting, right? And let's say the shareholder data also, the shareholder related information also, which is there with the company. There would be integrated voting. Now, integrated voting, what we mean over here is, there is remote e-voting for sure, but there is also e-voting at the meeting or during the meeting. And talking about the live streaming and engagement. So even though there is a two-way communication for sure, so therefore there is engagement also, there's live streaming also. But yes, when you have lots and lots of shareholders attending a virtual AGM, it's practically not possible to deal and communicate with each of the shareholders. Now, looking at the components of this virtual AGM, the virtual AGM platform has to be developed, right? Which allows the voting on the resolutions at the meeting itself, which allows various other things, which is is also able to showcase the various documents which the shareholders can inspect, which otherwise they would have inspected if it was a case of a physical AGM. Now, looking at this, there's also a new practice which may have to emerge, kind of pre-meeting questions from shareholders or shareholders discussion forums. Why do we say that? Because I just mentioned that even though a VC platform allows a two-way communication, it actually becomes impractical sometimes or impossible sometimes, that in the presence of so many, let's say 500,000 shareholders, the communication happens with each of them, or the questions could be taken from each of them and could be answered from to each of them. So the certain new concepts or certain new practices should be emerged, like pre-meeting questions from shareholders, which could be taken, and the company secretaries could keep the answers ready, probably, which can actually be just called out at the virtual AGMs. Or there could be a concept of shareholders discussion forums where shareholders actually come in, shareholders discuss the various matters, and final matters which require questions to be asked from the management can only be put up to the management during the virtual AGM. Now, there are certain concepts of physical meetings which will not apply to virtual meetings. What are those? Proxies. Of course, proxies are not at all required because there is no question of going to a meeting, right? We are actually at our own places from where the voting is taking place. So there is no concept of proxies in case of virtual meetings. Similarly, for corporate representatives also, because it becomes very, very unfructuous, because in case of virtual general meetings, you cannot authenticate who's actually coming. You cannot say that XYZ Limited is one who's coming, because XYZ Limited is logging in and voting through the designated ID password which is given to them. And let's say if Mr. A is the corporate representative, now there is no need for Mr. A to actually show that he's Mr. A, because he's actually voting for that XYZ Limited, and there is no question of proofing that Mr. A is the corporate representative for XYZ Limited. But yes, I mean, here would be some kind of practical experiences where maybe certain e-voting sites, they still require corporate resolutions under section 113 to be uploaded before the e-voting starts. So this is something which practically companies would have to see how this happens when virtual AGM takes place. Now, we were talking about the webcast. Now, webcast is given so that all the shareholders can participate. For example, if the VC platform allows or gives the facility to all the shareholders to participate in for the company. Let's say the company has 1,000 shareholders, and the VC platform allows the company to call the complete 1,000 shareholders. Then there is no need for the company to give another webcast, because even after giving the facility of virtual AGM, if the shareholder is not coming, I mean, the requirement or the concept of webcast will be again of no use if they are not attending the VC meeting and they get the webcast. Because if the facilities for participation from remote locations are being given through virtual meetings, there is no question for a webcast to be given at the same time. However, let's say if the VC platform has a limitation of only allowing 500 members out of 1,000 members that could be present, in that case, surely for the rest of 500 or the remaining shareholders, the webcast should be given, so that the rest of them who have actually voted, or let's say who are not able to participate in the VC per se, they get a chance to become privy to the discussions of the annual general meeting. Coming to the procedure before the virtual meeting. Now, virtual meeting, planning of the virtual meeting is not something you have to just, you take a decision today, we are going to hold the meeting, and tomorrow you actually hold it. No. There are a lot of procedures, a lot of steps which the company has to take to actually call an annual general meeting through a VC. First, as we can see, the board has to approve the date of the virtual AGM. There would be a pre-meeting public notice to register the emails. Then you actually register the emails of the members. Then you send the notices to the members through email. You upload the notice on the website. Then you give the public advertisement after dispatching the notices. Now, this is applicable for companies which are required to give e-voting. Now, the board approval will have to be for several things. AGM shall be conducted through VC and identification of item of business. Which platform will it be? What are the other modalities? Discussion of the items of ordinary business or unavoidable special businesses which will have to be taken up. The draft notices of the AGM. and the various notices which will be sent by email, the draft of the public advertisement, the appointment of the agency for e-voting, the appointment of the scrutinizer, the vendor for ease of payment of dividend through ECS, the documents for inspection, which will be uploaded, what would be those documents. So there are various things which the board and the management will have to consider and approve before calling and conducting a virtual AGM. When we talk about a pre-meeting public advertisement, so what is the requirement and what is the intent? Public advertisement is a requirement. Why? To qualify for conducting AGM through VC and providing equal opportunity to all the shareholders to participate in the AGM. When will you have to give this? You will have to give this before sending out the AGM notices. Now, public advertisement is required in all cases of virtual AGM except where companies have email addresses of all its members, because the main concept, the main requirement is that you inform your members that, see, we are going to hold a virtual AGM, and these are the other related information, and some of you who have not yet registered your email addresses, please register your email addresses by following the laid down procedure, and after you have registered, we will be sending out the notices to your respective email IDs. Now, if the company has the email addresses of all its shareholders, in that case, I mean, if you talk about the companies which are not required to provide e-voting, in that case, public advertisement is not required per se, because the intent of the public advertisement is to have the email addresses of all the shareholders and to facilitate the voting, so that it facilitates the voting. Now, if we have the email addresses of the requisite number, in that case, it is still required, so that we give the chance to the other shareholders who have not registered, and so that they can participate in the meeting. Coming to the email addresses of the requisite number which are not registered, of course, in that case, you will anyway have to give the pre-meeting public advertisement. So here we have a chart which depicts the companies not required to provide e-voting facility. Email ID registration with the company is required for the minimum 50% of the total number of members. Thus, that 50% should be representing 75% of value of the paid-up capital. If both the conditions are not fulfilled, give the public advertisement, get the email ID registered. And how do you do that? You provide in vernacular paper and English newspaper with electronic editions. And once you have registered, you can conduct your AGM for VC. So generally, once you give the pre-meeting public notice, you have to wait for 3 days, and then only you can send out the notices for the AGM. So that in the period of 3 days after giving the pre-meeting public notice, the shareholders have a chance to come back to the company and get their email addresses registered. Now, for companies which are required to provide e-voting facility, I mean, in those cases, there is also a requirement of publishing advertisement in newspaper after dispatching the notices of the AGM, right? So this particular advertisement is to be given before the dispatch of the notice as per MCA circular dated 5th May 2020, and after the dispatch of notice as per Rule 20. So I'm sorry, basically the requirement of publishing advertisement in the newspaper is twice. So what is the time frame? When do you give the advertisement? For companies which are required to provide e-voting facility, 1, before you dispatch the notice, AGM notice, and 2, after you dispatch the AGM notice. So the pre-meeting public advertisement notice will contain certain contents as per the circular, which includes the fact that the AGM is being conducted through VC as per and in compliance with the circular dated 8th April, 13th April, and 5th of May, the date, time, and the modalities of conducting the meeting through VC, which would include the login credentials, etc., The voting process shall be conducted through electronic means. That would include remote e-voting as well as voting during the meeting through e-voting. The fact that the notice is available on the website of the company, the manner in which documents and registers can be viewed by the members, or the link where such documents can be accessed, manner in which the shareholders which have not yet registered their email IDs can register the same with the company, and the manner in which the shareholders can provide the mandate for receiving dividends to ECs. Now, these are some of the information which is required to go in the pre-meeting public notice, informing the shareholders that they are going to soon attend a virtual AGM. Next, we come to the procedure at the virtual AGM. So, at the virtual AGM, the members are allowed to enter the virtual meeting room 15 minutes before the initial time for setting up the meeting or commencing the meeting. So let's say the VC meeting has been kept to be commenced at 10 a.m. So the members can start coming into the meeting room from 9:45 a.m. And the last time by which they are supposed to enter the meeting room, or they are allowed to enter the meeting room, is 15 minutes after the commencement time of the VC meeting, which in this case would be 10:15 a.m. So how will the shareholders log in? So the notice of the AGM will provide the modalities with respect to the login process. Usually, the email address of the shareholders will be used for login into the meeting platform by the company. So when the AGM notices are sent by the to the shareholders by the company, it contains the unique ID and password for the shareholder to log in for the purpose of e-voting. Similarly, for the e-voting process which is to be conducted during the meeting, similar process is to be also followed. So when we talk about the time for entering to the VC platform, the rules are very, very clear. I mean, the circular rules, the provisions in the rules are very clear that it's 15 minutes before the start and 15 minutes after the start. But what about the quorum requirements? The circulars mention that the quorum requirements will be in accordance with section 103 of the Act. And the Act gives me a time for 30 minutes from the scheduled time to ascertain the quorum. So VC rules provide an entry for 15 minutes. So does that mean that entry cannot be allowed after 15 minutes? The answer would probably be a no, because if the quorum is already present, then of course the entry may be stopped after 15 minutes. However, if the quorum is not present, one will have to look into the provisions of law as well, which already provides me a time of 30 minutes to ascertain the presence of quorum in the meeting. So what if the number of active members reduce after the meeting starts? Now, in such a case, technically, the quorum should be present throughout the meeting. And let's say the number of members, active members, reduces after the meeting starts. In such a scenario, let's say it was a case of a physical annual general meeting where the quorum was not present. In such a case, the AGM has to be adjourned. Now, similarly, in a VC AGM also, or the AGM conducted through video conferencing, if the quorum is not present, in such a case, the chairperson will have to take a call to adjourn the meeting. Further, the VC facility would also be required to keep a record of the members who are actively logged in throughout the meeting. So once the meeting starts, the first item, of course, would be the appointment of the chairperson. The circular again provides for adequate provisions of how the chairperson is to be appointed or elected in a meeting. Similarly, the quorum requirements are to be taken from section 103. Now, when we talk about inspection of documents, in a normal course where the companies used to have physical AGM, in that case, inspection of documents are allowed, let's say once the AGM notice has been dispatched till the date of the annual general meeting, right? And there is a specific time which is allowed when the members can come and inspect the respective documents. Now, in case of a virtual AGM, what should be, I mean, should we share with them on their email, or should we share some kind of a link along in the AGM notice, along mentioning in the AGM notice, or what? So of course these documents are surely confidential, and therefore they cannot be shared on a public platform like the website of the company. Therefore it is advisable, and therefore we are of the view that inspection of documents would actually be available during the meeting itself. So they can actually be uploaded on the VC platform only. And let's say if any shareholder requests for inspection during the meeting, the required documents can be shown to. What about the transactions? Now, both ordinary as well as special business items would be open for discussion and approval. And during this time, the VC platform must ensure the audio video facility, the two-way communication, and the recording. In fact, not only during the approval of transactions, but throughout the meeting, the whole meeting, starting from this initial commencement till the conclusion, the VC platform should be a two-way communication and should be recorded with both audio and video facility. At the same time, when we talk about voting, what would be the voting process? Now, there is surely there's no practical impossibility of voting through show of hands. The permitted modes would be like for companies which are required to give e-voting, right? That is in accordance with section 108, as well as poll. Now, when we say poll, it's not about voting through the polling papers, because we are not talking about physical AGM. We are talking about virtual AGMs. Now, in this case, the voting process would be conducted through either emailing the assent or dissent on the registered email address of the company by the shareholders to a designated email ID, preferably of the scrutinizer, or through the e-voting on the VC platform itself. Now, for companies which are not required to give e-voting, there the voting takes place by sending emails only. Whether members can participate in virtual AGM after they have casted their vote through e-voting? The answer is surely yes, because in case of physical AGMs also, if members have already casted their vote through e-voting, there is no restriction, there is no prohibition for such a member to attend the AGM. What about the procedure after the virtual AGM? Once the AGM is concluded, the proceedings of the AGM is required to be submitted to the stock exchange within 24 hours from the conclusion of the meeting in case of listed companies. In case of a public company, recorded transcript has to be uploaded on the website of the company. In this case, when we're talking about a recorded transcript, I mean, the line-to-line transcript, it generally is of relevance, so it's generally hardly of any relevance. So in that case, the minutes or the proceedings of the meeting should also suffice. The scrutinizer will be required to submit the report after collating the information of voting through e-voting and those who have voted through email. The scrutinizer's report would be required to be submitted to the exchange within 48 hours of the conclusion of the meeting. In case of listed companies, the minutes would be required to be prepared, and finally the entry and signing of minutes would be made within 30 days of the conclusion of the meeting. Now, in such a scenario where we are talking about virtual AGM, there might be a situation that it is not possible to actually sign the minutes within the time frame given. In such a scenario, digital signatures would always be preferable, would always be an option. And when the situation normalizes, the final signatures or the physical signatures would be taken on the minutes. Now, coming to a very interesting area in today's discussion, how will the scrutinize the voting process? Now, generally, there are certain safeguards, there are certain rules which the scrutinizers have to follow while they are scrutinizing the voting process. Now, friends, during the VC AGM also, the scrutinizer should have the same roles and responsibility. Apart from the fact that the scrutinizer will not be required to physically count the polling papers, right? Because all the votes would be either through email or on the VC platform or through the remote e-voting. So what about the question of authenticity of voting? So here, when we are talking about authenticity, in case of remote e-voting, the votes are surely authenticated because they're coming from the respective shareholders who have already shared the required papers with the company, or let's say they have shared their requisite identification details because of which their email IDs are registered, and therefore the same person is casting their vote. In case of the other shareholders who have, let's say, who have registered the email IDs with the company, who are are voting at the meeting through the e-voting process, in such cases when the email IDs are registered and the company shares the login credentials with the shareholder, they could be asked to share certain valid and let's say original documents like their share certificates or their the statutory the signatures which are already lying with the RTA in their database, with which the same can be matched. Also, scrutinizers will have to keep in mind certain restrictions on voting by certain members. Like in case of related parties transactions, the votes by related parties have to be excluded in case they have voted. And at the same time, you have to understand that if the votes have been casted inadvertently by the directors, or let's say by any other person other than the shareholder, in that case one has to verify that, one has to identify that and exclude that accordingly, and then proceed with making of the scrutinizer's report. So in case of remote voting, the scrutinizer's process would be according to section 108. In case of voting through email, one will have to verify the email address of the members with the folio numbers. Members may be required to scan the share certificates to ensure authenticity of the votes. And there should be a system-based mechanism for recording emails receiving during the voting period. How will companies record such meetings in the minutes? How will companies ensure entry and signing? So of course, as we mentioned we discussed in the previous slide also, or entry into the minutes book within 30 days of completion, this can be deferred till normalization of the crisis. And accordingly, the signing can also be deferred. If required, digital signing on the soft copies can be made. Whether uploading of entire transcript on the website is mandatory. In our view, if we just upload the proceedings of the AGM, that the same should also suffice. Now, since this is a case of a virtual annual general meeting, there is no question of the opportunity of giving heard. Now, when I say that, I don't really mean that, because we have already discussed that virtual AGM should always be a two-way communication process. However, friends, we have to keep in mind the exact language of the MCA circular dated 8th April, which clarified that all urgent business transactions can be approved through virtual AGM. However, items of business which provides a person right to be heard cannot be passed through virtual general meetings. Some of them include removal of the auditors, removal of directors, or any such transaction. So what if the companies receive notice for removal of auditor or director after sending the AGM notice? So in case the company receives a shareholders resolution, or you can say shareholders resolution for circulation under section 111, but if the requisitionists fulfill the threshold requirements of section 100, in that case the meeting will have to be converted from a virtual meeting to a physical meeting. So friends, finally, followed by the relaxations given by MCA, SEBI has also been bringing various relaxations. Recently, SEBI had also brought in some relaxations on the 12th of May, wherein it has relaxed the requirements of sending physical documents to the shareholders. Also, it has relaxed the requirement of sending proxy forms, issuance of dividend warrants till the postal services normalizes, and various other relaxations for the smooth operations during the crisis period. So friends, hope this webinar would be useful to you all, and please do share your feedback on the same, and stay safe at home. And we hope that this crisis ends soon and we all are back to our normal working routine from offices and not from home. And till then, take care. All the best. Thank you.